Hey there, I'm Christopher McClure, and I'm here with Jeannie Buesser, who is a author and an artist. And I want to talk to her today about her life and how um, how the way that she has met the adversity in her life has contributed to not only the books and the art that she's created, but the person who she is and how that person is an inspiration to the rest of us. So if we'll just go right into the questions, and the first question I have for you, I guess I want to say, just I want to I'd like to give people a little bit of a background that you were, tell us where you were born and, maybe where you live now and just a rough sketch of, your life, like in 25 words or less, if that's possible.
Sure. So many, many years ago, you're talking about the 1960s
Hmm.
is when I was born. And back then, you did not necessarily have the medical knowledge or the technology or the support for a preemie baby born at 6 months
Mm.
who was only a pound.
Wow.
So, I
And,
mean, a
and
little
that
more
was,
than
and
that.
just to be clear, that was you.
That was me.
Yeah.
So, at that particular point, my mother was told, she never talked about it, but I think my mother was told to go home
Mm.
because no one expected me to survive. And I was in the hospital for 3 months. So when I finally did come home, um, my parents had, unbeknownst to me, my parents did have a big bill
Mm.
from all the, the nurse and the doctor care, which back then they didn't have any money for, but they had to be creative in order to pay the bill so they can bring me home.
Right. And this was in South Africa, right?
No, no, no.
Oh,
This was here.
oh, okay.
Yes, I'm sorry. This was in New Jersey.
Okay.
Yes, when I was born. Yes.
And which is where you're living now also.
Where I'm living now. Yes. Yeah. I'm in a different town, but basically that's so, back then, just with my parents, it was something like $2,500,
Mm.
which was an exorbitant amount of money back in the 1960s
Right.
when they didn't necessarily have insurance and any of that stuff. So they had to be creative in order to bargain or barter or whatever we needed to do in order to pay that bill so I could come home.
Hmm.
So that was my start.
And then later in life you were married and you started to have children and just tell us a little bit about
Yeah,
that.
so it when I was younger, I lived overseas in Africa for most of for about 8 years. Um, and it was the hard thing was me adjusting when I came back because I really didn't know the United States at all. I just knew Kenya. And so it was a bit of a struggle coming home and finding out that people were not as kind as I thought people would have been
Mm.
for somebody who was being transplanted from one country to another. So that was like my first experience in culture shock and what people maybe have been ignorant, not really realizing other cultures. So that was my start,
Mm.
when I was 13.
Mm. I see. And
Um,
and
but
then
so from there, fast forward, I had a couple jobs and things like that. Um, I worked in a restaurant, met my husband, and then I had my sons. Um, and everything was going along very well in the beginning, until my first son um, got a cancerous tumor, a rare cancerous tumor at 2.5. and passed away within, well, close to 3, passed away within 24 hours.
Wow.
So that was my first journey. I already had my second son at that point who was special needs and not talking. So that's my very beginning.
Mm. And then the way that you and your husband dealt with these adversities was very different. And tell us more about.
Yeah, so back then when I had that particular platform, if you want to call it, I was grieving and he did not want to talk about it.
Mhm,
His relationship with whoever he was inside.
mhm,
So we were completely different platforms, completely different people within this marriage.
yeah.
I went to support groups. He didn't necessarily go with me, or if he did, he didn't know how to deal with it or
Mhm.
did not deal with it. And that's how it's lasted that way for many, many years.
And that culminated in.
So from there, after my son passed away, my first son, Daniel, I started writing poems because that was the only way to express myself after going to the bereavement groups, and they all told me I should um, publish them, which I didn't know anything about at that particular point. And I was also a librarian for 18 years for the bereavement group, the Compassion Friends.
Mhm.
So that was my very, very, very beginning after my son passed.
And just, so the listeners know what, to just share with them what eventually happened with your husband.
Yeah, so eventually, after that happened with my son, I had to kind of be a solo parent in a sense.
Hmm.
My husband was dealing with his own issues, not so much with mine.
Hmm.
And so he didn't necessarily know how to emotionally support each other.
Hmm.
Even though we might have gone to therapy, it didn't necessarily mean that we could really communicate. Shortly after that, um, many years later, he excuse me retired from his job and was looking for other jobs. Um, and he had his own issues. I'll put it to you that way.
Hmm.
One day I went out and I came back and he had taken his own life.
Hmm.
So that's my story in a nutshell.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I think that gives people just an idea of what you've been through. Um, so first question is, what is your relationship with darkness? You use that word darkness with, I think another word is shadow. Everybody has their own shadow.
Yeah,
And I've been using the word adversity. It's like, I think we're really talking about the same thing, whether it's inside or out. It's the same energy that gets projected, in either arena. And how is this? How has it appeared in your life, and how have you learned to deal with it?
well, if I go back to after my son passed, I was in a lot of darkness, a lot of pain. And I did not necessarily know how to deal with it, talk about it, even though I was writing poetry. You know, there was a situation where you put on thick skin, if they call it that. You
Hmm.
might have heard that.
Sure.
And so I was wearing that for many, many, close to 20 years.
Well.
Um, and so it wasn't until much, much later, um, I was working with someone and I began to feel pain. And I never felt that before,
Hmm.
the emotional pain.
Mm.
Hold on for a minute.
Okay.
I'm downstairs and I'm on the phone. Sorry. So, um, what happened was I never necessarily felt emotional pain before.
Mm.
And I was able to, with the help, I was able to lay down and just be able to release it.
Hmm.
But for those 2 weeks that I had it, I was scared. I didn't know what was happening to me
Mm.
until I was able to confront it and realize what it was.
Hmm.
I had peeled back the layers, and because I had peeled back the layers, that what was came up.
And having, those finally having those experiences of experiencing your emotions, the emotions that you couldn't experience before, you just didn't have
Yes,
the capacity because you had to survive. Uh,
yes.
how how has that shaped your current emotional nature?
Because of that, I'm able to feel more with my emotions,
Hmm.
get in touch with my emotional physical body, and understand when I am getting triggered or
Hmm.
what is happening,
Hmm.
to be grounded, to be able to release and know when something is happening that triggers me or emotionally. But being able to feel, physically feel, which
So
is
so I
something on an emotional level which I didn't initially do before,
mhm.
and that included me interacting with my sons as well.
I see.
Because coming from a family where emotions were not talked about or felt.
Right, which is so common, through our culture and especially in that time period.
Yes,
I grew up in the decade before, but it definitely was a uh, a conditioning that our society gave to every member of.
it's not, it's not a question of you having a negative or positive choice.
Mm.
You were just told what you were told and expected to do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and and most people are in a sense victims of that conditioning. They just, they don't have the individual kind of sovereignty to, say, hell no, I'm gonna, I'm gonna feel what I'm feeling. Yeah. So
Having the choice to make the choice and just saying, hey, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to
right,
switch.
yeah. So once you got in touch with your emotional, nature, how did that propel you through the rest of your life?
It was a long haul,
Hmm.
but I'm grateful because I'm no longer the person that I was.
Mm.
Had I stayed in that same mindset, I don't think I would have, how can I say this? I don't think I would have been positive.
Hmm.
There are individuals who I know from the still bereaved group who are still carrying that torch,
Mm. Yeah.
not being able to let it go,
Yeah.
not being able to reinvent themselves or pull back the layer or as I said, pull the band-aid off
Yeah.
and have it be raw,
Hmm.
but being able to heal and go on
Yeah.
to a higher level of ways of thinking and being,
Yeah.
if you understand that.
Oh, well, I do, and personally, I find that, I say generally I am a sort of a high-minded person. I'm idealistic, and I really look for the potential in myself and others. But when things happen, when circumstances happen, I get shown how how many lower beliefs and just habits, emotional
Yes.
habits still exist. And it's like, I tend to feel punished by the universe, um, and so it's like it's like a works in progress. It's like
Yeah, I,
we
I,
move
I don't,
forward, we move
right.
forward, and in moving forward, the stuff that's in the way of moving forward comes up to be healed.
Yes, because you need to release it, yes.
Yeah.
And have a different mindset
Yeah.
and have a different energy going forward, releasing what you no longer need. But at the same time, I look at it as being grateful for that because I'm able to evolve, I'm able to ascend, if you want to call it that,
Hmm.
to a different vibration. And
Yeah.
therefore, I'm able to be able to be in touch with my feelings and explain them to my sons on a simplistic level.
Mm.
So therefore, they are able to mature and they were able to grow and release what they might have been brought up with
Hmm.
prior.
Yeah. Well, that and I want you to talk more about just the process of releasing, but so go ahead and do that. But then I want to bring your sons back into the conversation.
Sure.
So
So
yeah.
you talk about releasing. So releasing is being able to have trust from the higher beings, whatever you would like to call them,
Hmm.
to be able to ground yourself, to be able to release what you no longer need, and also change your way of thinking.
Hmm. How do you I don't know if you can put it into words, but if you can, how do you release? It's like it's easier said than done. Just
Okay, so when you're talking about releasing,
yeah.
okay, so when you're talking about releasing, what I've been doing Tai Chi for 15 years, 16 years.
Hmm.
And in Tai Chi, one things the Tai Chi Cha is you are like a root of a tree. Your
Hmm.
feet are the roots of the tree, and
Okay.
they go into the earth. And your body is the trunk, and your leaves and whatnot are your hands or whatnot. So grounding yourself as you walk along your path, your feet become grounded like the roots into the earth.
Mm.
So that gives you a physical picture of being able to be grounded into the earth
This,
and not be, how can I say it? And not be absorbed by other thoughts because that's where your mind is being on a simplistic level.
so what I hear you saying is that when you need to release something, you can release it into the earth. The earth will like kind of take that energy.
Yeah, because you're grounding. Yes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, my wife does this when she gets kind of, flustered and triggered. She'll go out in the backyard and just squat down and put her hands on the earth and just like, stay there for, numerous minutes until the charge
Yes.
dissipates into the earth.
Yes.
I think,
Because if you think about your mind and your body are connected. Your mind, your stomach are connected. So if your mind is going a mile a minute, it's going to control your stomach and everything else,
yeah,
the energy.
right. So if
So
you
you
get
have to
that
be
off,
able to turn that off,
right.
that voice, whatever you want to call it, or monkey chatter, whatever you want to call
Yeah,
it,
right.
to be very simple and quiet and at peace.
Yeah, they say, I've also been doing Tai Chi for decades, and they say if your mind is in your dantian, which is
Yes.
the physical center of your body, you can't go crazy. Uh,
Yes.
but there is that kind of it
It controls you. Yeah.
yeah. So then I wanted you to talk about, like it's like you've been this works in progress, that's kind of why I use the word bootstrapping, but like because it's like you you're in the process and you've got to like reinvent yourself while being in the process. And you had to raise your sons, and your sons are emotionally, perhaps cognitively challenged. So
Yes.
you've got to be, they say that if when you teach something, you learn it so much better. So you were in this position where you had to be reinventing yourself and then teaching it to your sons, uh,
Yes.
and them being sort of, challenged themselves. So you had that was
Yes.
like an extra level of, uh,
Because there was, back then there was no rule book.
yeah.
I also, with my youngest son who was autistic, he was completely different than my middle son who had apraxia.
Mm.
And so therefore I started a group for a nonprofit 22 years ago for him
Mm.
because there was no support then in Jersey. There was nothing. You know, there might have been maybe another support group down in Central Jersey, but besides me and Lisa, who ran the other group, there was nothing. So the only thing you heard about apraxia was if you were a senior and you had a stroke. So there was nothing regarding any kids who might have been born with this. So it's not, so I had to learn as I went along because there was no book, there was no manual.
Right. You were creating the manual.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The same thing is, Adam had a different um, therapy, speech therapy than Josh.
Mm.
They were both completely different individuals. I could not put a band-aid and say, okay, you're going to do the same thing because wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
One was had a hard time being able to speak because he had low muscle tone and things like that and neurological um, disconnect versus my other son who was on the autism did not necessarily speak um, because he was also in his own zone.
Mm. Yeah. I mean,
So,
it's
so I had to try and pull him in so he could connect with me,
mm.
versus my other son who knew what he wanted, but he just could not produce the beginning sounds of speech,
Uh,
because of his muscle tone and delay and everything else. So I had different speech pathologists and everything else and MRIs and whatnot. I had to go through all of that.
yeah. I imagine that it's, I mean, it seems to me as I'm listening to you that, this, it's almost like a curse that's a blessing. The fact that your sons were handicapped in that this way, it it created like it kind of forced you into a state of compassion. It's like you couldn't, like people who were in your position, because of the things that happened to you, some people might just kind of go into victimhood, and just kind of give up, but it's like you had this built-in compassion for your sons, and so you had to, it forced you to, even mobilize more.
Yeah, even if there was no manual at that point.
Right,
I
right.
could not see the forest and the trees because I didn't know whether they were ever going to
Mm.
speak,
All right.
whether I'd ever have communication with them. I didn't know.
Yeah. Um, so talk about the process of reinventing yourself, and how you've done it and how you continue to do it. What, like if somebody's just asked you, Jeannie, how do you reinvent yourself? Tell us, tell us what you know. Give us some tips about that.
Well, I think part of reinventing yourself is two parts. Not to be afraid of letting go what you no longer need.
Mm.
Finding the parts of yourself that no longer reside with you, the old thoughts, the old ways of being, and letting yourself let them go, you know. And because, what I've learned also is as you release the stuff you no longer need, you are opening yourself up to more space of new things that might come in,
Yeah, it's kind of like
experiences or whatnot. Yeah.
by saying no, your yes becomes stronger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you kind of, it sounds like, you've got this radar screen for how to reinvent yourself because you're a self-growth person, and part of the like guardrails or something on this radar screen is to be aware of what comes to the surface, recognizing, and then and recognizing what needs to leave, what's in the way, what you
Or
see.
sometimes you don't know. I mean, for example, when I first did my first book, My son Adam was taking lessons. He was not.
Just say the name of that book, just so people know.
Oh, he talks funny.
He talks funny. Okay.
Yes, so I had the idea for my book because of the nonprofit I had caused, and I there was a situation at a pool where my son had gone to the local pool, and another father had come up to me with his son and my husband at the time. I went to the food bar, to get French fries or whatnot. And so this gentleman came up to my husband and tried to have like a little bit conversation or something like that with my son Adam, who was not verbal at the time.
Mm,
But because Adam didn't necessarily know how to respond or have a conversation, the son, the father looked at my husband like and gave him like a dirty look, like, "What's wrong with your son?" Picked up his son and walked off.
mm,
So, and my husband had never ever dealt with any of that because he was working. So
okay.
I would go to the stores and I'd have, my son would have a fit because, whether it was he wanted certain things and he couldn't necessarily speak, um, and I didn't know if he was going to have a meltdown.
Mm,
And this was, so you have that, added into it. So my point was so that was the reason I wrote the book, He Talks Funny. So I had this story in my head, how to write it, but I didn't know how to write it. I didn't know how to color. I didn't know how to paint. So
mhm,
my son's art teacher, my son decided he was in high school at that time. I don't want to do art anymore. He didn't necessarily doodle. So I took over his paints and I explained to the art teacher what I wanted. So she helped me draw it and get the color palette and everything else. And that's my first stick figure um, drawing of He Talks Funny.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you have this really strong will, which I would imagine if you were born, premature and only 1 pound, you have this like fighting spirit, and you you just like whatever what you need to do, you have this kind of drive to do what you need to do, and you just whatever's in your environment that can help you do that, you just kind of grab hold of. And it sounds like you did that with the art and
Yes, yeah. So I didn't necessarily know how to draw or write a book, and I didn't. And at that time, it was way before the internet.
mm,
I mean, you still had the internet, but it was not. Um, I didn't know how to do research, not knowing that the first book that I published, it was for with a company that wanted my book, but they also wanted the sales and the royalties and everything else. So this was before Amazon.
yeah, sure.
So every little change would, a sentence or two or proofing it, whatnot, would have cost me a lot. So I had a lot of money that I put out and I didn't always recoup it,
Mm, yeah.
but there's no other book like it on um, in the bookstores or on Amazon or anything else. So my book
And
is,
and that is one of the books that Barnes and Nobles is, right? Is that one of the books that
yes,
they're wanting to get in the stores, actually print them for you and get them in their stores? And I don't know, how do you know how many Barnes and Noble stores there are in the
I
United States?
don't know how many there are anymore
I
because I
mean,
know a lot of them have closed. But I also explained to the person that it's not exactly a children's book.
hmm,
I explained to them. I said it has to be read too, or how can I say it? What's the word I want? When condensed. So it
hmm,
has to be, there's only 4 pictures in it, but you have to take the story and condense it and make it very, very simple for people to understand
hmm,
because it has warning signs and things like that for parents would look for.
yeah.
Um, so that's like one of my first, excuse me, my first book. But what I've also loved is that soon after I wrote that book, I started painting. And I did not know how to paint. I didn't really know what colors were. And after I started painting my paintings, shortly after that, I acquired stories that came with them. So it's not like I can say, oh, these two match together. It didn't always happen that way. I
Mhm.
do a painting and then I do another painting, or whatever the case may be. And then I wake up one day and a story got in my head.
Mm,
Oh, that goes with this picture.
right.
Okay, and I can put another picture in the book that
Mm.
I've written. And, yeah, so that's how,
Yeah, it's cool how the sort of unbeknownst to your conscious mind, the your creative muse was like matching things up,
yeah, as I
through
said, the
medium.
people upstairs, whatever you want to call them,
Yeah,
I'm grateful for because I said they sent, either stories my way or showed me how to put the pieces together.
yeah. So I want to ask you. I mean, we've kind of talked around this, but just what is your relationship with self growth? Like why self growth? What is it and why? And
I don't know what it is. It's just something that I know that I need to do. There's a
right.
part of me that needs to do to evaluate, uh, um, to ascend, if you want to call it that, to go to higher consciousness,
Well, you
to
talked you talked about being positive, and it seems like in order to be positive, you got to be growing. It's like,
yes.
yeah,
Oh, definitely.
right.
Yeah.
And it also, I think, what goes along with self growth is self discovery.
Yes.
That,
Oh,
that,
definitely. Yeah.
so how, like, just can you kind of sketch out how you have discovered yourself? What have you discovered about yourself in this journey that you've been on? That you like.
I am extremely grateful. What I've discovered about myself is that there is a part of me that might have been afraid in the very, very, very beginning,
Mhm,
but how I was able to overcome that,
mm,
ground myself and release and accept the gifts that I receive and also the lessons and the blessings as well, because I never know from where they come.
mm.
Whether it's meeting a certain individual that might have um, a connection to something, or maybe meeting another artist who might be on the same wavelength of, so when I talk to them, whether it's whoever they are, I don't have to explain myself because I get it.
So part of the process of self-discovery is actually discovering the resources that are in your environment, including people and courses, instructors and um,
Yeah, whether it's a, course or just finding the right, finding your people, if you want to call it that.
right.
But also, understanding that, the other thing is we're all on different wavelengths. So I'm just going to throw a number. So you might be, I don't know, a 7.5,
Hmm.
right? But your children may not necessarily be up that high. So you have to understand that you can't always talk to them on that level because they can't comprehend that. They have not ascended or they have not learned enough in their life to understand that complexity of a thought because they are still learning as they're going through life how
Right.
to stumble and fall and pick pieces up and learning as they're going.
Well, I mean that what you're talking about is some people might become sort of condescending because of that. Whereas it sounds like you have just you have this built-in kind of compassion that uh, where you just you work to bridge that gap between where you are and where they are.
Yeah. But also knowing when to step back.
Ah,
Also knowing when to step back and when to release and not so much be in their space.
I see.
You
Yeah,
know,
that's and that is a part of compassion. The way I understand it is, sometimes compassion is being right there in somebody's face, and
yes.
and, and other times it's like giving them space to
Yes.
go
So
through
they
what
can learn and breathe and
they're
learn
going
on
through.
their own.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So you did mention you were talking about being afraid, and I just, it's like it sounds like you've had to muster a lot of courage in your life. And
Yeah.
is there anything you can say about that, that would help people who are facing adversity and they feel afraid? It's like, how do you have any tips on how to, muster that courage?
I don't know if I have any tips because each person is unique and different.
Hmm.
And and therefore, so it's not like a band-aid one size fits all.
Sure. But
Because everybody also has to be able to acknowledge their dark side, if you want to call it that, or their pain, or whatever the situation is. And whether it's going from for therapy or finding the right niche, but also being able to not only have the compassion and feel, but to also, forgive yourself
mm,
because of past issues that you might have had that you didn't know there was a pattern that might have been going on that you could not see the forest and the trees, if you want to call it that.
right. And that,
Because everybody's on a different level. So who am I to say, oh, this is how you're supposed to do it if that person is not at that particular level?
sure.
If they're on a much lower,
Sure.
lower level and they don't have the the compassion or the capacity to even acknowledge that or know how to even go there.
Right. But sometimes, the very thing that works for you, you could, you can express that, and not in the sense of, hey, this is the way to do it, this is the way. It's just like, this is what I've found. And that can be just like a gold mine for somebody. It's like,
Yeah.
oh wow, I didn't, is
But
there
they also have to be open to it too.
well, sure, sure. Yeah, totally. But I mean, if like, can you just say how do you muster courage? Like when you know you have to do something and it's hard, how do you get up the gumption to actually take that first step?
Well, I'll put it to you this way. For example, last year, 2 years ago, I lost my sight in my left eye.
Right,
I had a detached retina surgery. I had four of them. And I also had a cataract. And the and so therefore me being an artist with two eyes didn't was not there anymore.
right.
And so you talk about courage. So I had to sit in a chair facing down for 6 months,
Mm,
not being able to get up for 5 minutes at a time.
wow.
Okay, so that just to give you that idea. So both my sons, even though I had help and people would stay over, so that was a big wake-up call for them because mom was not able to do what was able to do before.
Mm.
Okay, so so there's the whole thing in a nutshell. I did not have a choice, but I had to try and save my eye. And that was what I was told to sit in a chair face down and get up every only 5 minutes of the hour.
Yeah, it sounds like the
So
way
if you had something, for example, if you had something like a sandwich that somebody gave you, you couldn't eat it,
mm,
not within 5 minutes. So it would take you most of the day at little nibbles in order to have that sandwich. Or or to have a drink with a straw, or to have a cereal, dry cereal with a little milk. So just you know, to give you an idea about there's a perfect example.
well, it sounds like it's a lot of patience and a lot of discipline. Um, but and once again, it's like you were forced into that decision. It's like you really didn't have a choice.
No,
You just had to do it.
yeah,
And it sounds like a lot of things in your life were like that, have been like that, where you're just
yeah,
like, you know, you just get slammed with this circumstance, and you just, it's like either you lay down and and say uncle, or you stand up and you move
Yeah.
forward, and you've chosen to stand up and move forward. And that's the thing. That's the thing that I find inspiring about you, that you've done that over and over again. Because, I know it for myself. um, for instance, yesterday, or it was Friday, Thursday, I was out doing errands, and I went to start my car, and like the key broke off in the ignition. It's
Oh no.
and I was like, what the F, it's like,
Yeah.
and I felt, and I finally, after realizing I couldn't get it out myself, and I, called this, city lock, and it was going to cost between 300 and $500. It's like, I felt, uh, I felt, all day I felt kind of punished by the universe, and I felt very mopey. Um, so I mean, there's an example of how I'm generally kind of idealistic, but something like that happens, and it brings up all my
Yeah. You have
stuff.
no control over it.
Uh,
Yeah.
you know, but by the next day, I was like, okay, yeah, moving forward. But it takes that time to kind of, I don't know, we just have to go through that process of all, of those, going through those beliefs, and maybe realizing, oh, well, and every time I go through something like that, I realize that I'm a little lighter from it. It's like, I
Because you're also releasing the thought. You're releasing that energy of the lower energy.
right, right, and
Because you
along,
realize there's nothing you could have done. It's not like you caused it. It's just something that happened. But
right.
it's how you deal with that.
Right, but it shows me all these underlying kind of beliefs, like that I'm being punished by the universe. It's like, and how is that generally affecting my life? Just that but every time I go through that, I realize there's I realize that the payoff for holding that belief is less and less desirable. And it's just this, it's a works in progress, a constant thing. But what the reason I mention that is because you've been in these circumstances over and over again, where it's like there wasn't a lot of wiggle room. It was just like, either you give up, or you move forward, and you've just continued to go move forward. And like I said, that's why I find you an inspiration. And
Thank you.
yeah.
I think like anything else, you know, we're also given not only choices every day, but situations that, as you said, something can happen just like that key. There's nothing that you did, it just happened. But it's how you deal with it.
Right. And that is essentially what we're talking about today, is
Yeah.
is how, each of us has our own play, our own, there's been a play written about our life.
Yeah.
But it's like, how does this character deal with adversity? And
Well,
that is generally what plays are about. Theater is, you
yeah.
you take characters, you put them in adverse situations, and you see what they're made of.
I mean, it's very interesting because like right now, when I wrote the book Toxie,
Hmm.
um, I had a picture in my head of I woke up one day and I had an indigenous person, and this indigenous person was talking to me, like a chief or something like that. And I got the feeling from another past life that I must have been either a daughter or a granddaughter or part of this tribe, whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
And so therefore I was able to, with my art teacher's direction, I was able to paint his story, paint him. But further on down the road, I decided to write his story.
Hmm.
And then after that story was done, somebody mentioned maybe there should be a sequel to it. And so there I was like, what? I didn't even think about it at the time. But a couple, months later, bing, it came in my head, and I started writing the characters that were in the first story, who stories had never been told. And so like this other one that I'm doing now, I've one of my other stories called Breezy's Island. So I have the main two characters, and someone also mentioned the same thing. Maybe I should do a sequel, and I thought, well, you know what? The two characters I've already talked about, but maybe their parents of either side and what their stories were and some other thing and how this whole came to be.
Hmm.
So it's kind of it's really funny because it's not like I sat down and said, "Oh, I'm going to write another sequel,"
Well, it sounds like
accompanying it to this book. It just
it
somebody
comes.
suggested it and I didn't, well, I wasn't even thinking about it.
Well, it's sort of it sounds like it's kind of excuse me, popping out of the unconscious, whether it's your unconscious, you wake up from sleep or the collective unconscious, somebody,
Made a
your
suggestion, yeah.
your expression triggers something in somebody else and that triggers an expression
Yeah,
and
because somebody also pointed out to me, just because somebody else suggests it doesn't necessarily mean you should start it.
sure.
Which, right. And I said, okay, I get that. So I wasn't sort of looking for that. But
Yeah.
then, so it's not like I was thinking about, oh, I should do this and this and this and this just because when somebody suggested it, you know?
Like it's a creative impulse.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand
So
that.
now, I decided, well, you know what? Maybe I should, I don't know. It's not the same energy as that first one, from Toxie, but because I have to think of more, it's a little harder to do
Hmm.
because, the one thing about the books that I write, the minimum is like 27 pages. So I have to have at least 27 pages of
Of plot.
a plot
Yeah.
from these characters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
as I'm writing it, oh, you know what? Maybe I'll think of this. No, maybe I'll add to this. So
Yeah,
it's like a
yeah.
work in progress.
But, most of your books are about people like you. In other words, people who have had adversity and they had to rise above that adversity. And, so not only are you an inspiration, but your books are an inspiration.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you very much.
yeah. Um, it made me when you talked about, you having this dream and then you had this like chief talking to you. It reminded me of your you seem to have some ability as like a medium. It's like you're able to channel some energy from uh, beyond just the physical plane, the physical realm.
Yeah, I did not necessarily know that I was always interested in the spiritual, always,
Hmm.
from a young child. But I did not necessarily know what that actually meant.
Hmm.
For example, when I was, before I came back here to the United States, my grandmother, my father's mother, who was very spiritual or very creative, had passed away. And and unbeknownst to me, we were not we were not in the United States at the time. And I remember falling asleep and hearing a rustling, almost like a paper rustling or like a skirt, and I was asleep. And I woke up and I didn't hear anything, but I felt like a presence in my room. And so not so apparently she must have come after she had passed to come visit me.
I see.
And so what I did is I jumped out of bed and I ran to my parents' room and went to sleep, because before that I never had an experience. That was the only experience I ever had,
Mm-hmm.
when I was like 12, you know. And so I never really had that experience until much, gosh, many, many, many years later, when as I began to evolve and open up, then I was able to sense certain things, maybe a situation or not so much, I shouldn't say that I was talking to people, but how can I say, I have to be, I'm going to be honest, I have to be very um, what's the word I want? Almost like indifferent
Oh, I
or
see. Equanimous.
yeah, so in those I have to be, I have to be very careful about how you open the doors. I'll put it to you that way.
I see. You have to be in kind of an even temperament to so that so you're like an open channel, kind of.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
But
Right.
you have to, I said, close the doors because you don't want to let everybody in.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so let's see. So who, like I've been talking about how you're an inspiration and your books are an inspiration, but who 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 or what, people have been inspiration to you.
Well, my dad.
Your dad,
My
yeah,
dad
sure.
was very creative.
Uh-huh.
My mom was, was very serious, but my dad was very creative.
Hmm.
And um, but he also kept to himself. So back then you didn't necessarily have the I don't want to call it a stigma or I don't know what you want to call it, whether it was ADD or ADHD, I have no idea. He just kept to himself. And I said also, from what his job was, whatever it was, um, which he kind of kept to himself as well. So at the same time, my grandmother was always very, I really didn't know her that well, but my father's mother was always very creative. She was a miller. She made hats. She was part of, she went into a orphanage where she painted paintings for rent, made little dolls, miniature dolls, not just large dolls, but miniature dolls on skating rinks and things like that. And it was, so she was my other grandmother, my mother's mother was also creative, but not in the same sense. So from my
Yeah.
father, um, from him having that gene from my grandmother, that's who got passed as we were all born. So both my sisters and I are all different in a sense of what creative genes we have.
So, so your dad, your grandmother, and are there any, artists or writers that are, you find that
Well, when I was growing up, the one thing from Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Oh, uh-huh.
Yeah. So I had a poster in my room. Do not follow where the path leads. Rather go where there is no path and leave a trail.
Mm,
And I had that in my room when I was, when I came back.
mm.
And that was like an inspiration to me.
Yeah. Cool. Um, you've talked about uh, changing your energy, and I think that's part of reinventing yourself.
Yes.
Um, can you can you say more about that? How do you change your energy? What does that entail? I mean, do you do you get a vision of where you want to go or who you want to
No,
be? No.
no,
So
no. It's
how does
just
that?
it's just being able to physically feel your energy, be in tune with yourself.
Uh, and when you say be in tune with your energy, you're not saying. It sounds like you're saying being in tune with your deeper energy or with the energy that's beyond your, say, your physical body. That uh,
Um, no, no, I would say what's in your physical body.
okay,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that energy is in a sense kind of pure, and it has kind of a
I don't know. I don't know whether it's pure, but I'm saying whatever energy you have, but be able to feel into the emotions and know
feeling.
when things are triggering you. You know when things are calm and peaceful. That's
I
what I
see.
meant.
So the energy and emotions are kind of synonymous.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right. We're almost done here. Um, so I've talked um, I've called you a wounded healer, you know,
Yes.
and
And I'm extremely grateful for that. Because I,
you know, I think, you know, there's enough people probably in our listening audience that know what that means, you know, but for anybody who doesn't, it just means it's a person who's been disadvantaged, and because they've been disadvantaged, they have to work harder at something, and because they've had to work harder, they become, in a sense, an expert in that thing, and then that expertise becomes a gift to humanity, right? So, all humility aside, you know, like, how do you see yourself as a wounded healer, and and what do you think your gifts to humanity are?
I think the truer you are to yourself, the better you will be.
Hmm.
You can't lie to yourself. You can't put stuff on there in you that does not exist.
And
And
that
and being, being at peace and realizing that you are whoever you are, accepting that, accepting your flaws, accepting everything. And
and
y-
accepting your gifts too. I mean,
yes,
that's
yeah,
hard. That's hard for a lot of us to
and not having um that
accept.
mindset, of being conceited or any of that. You
Mm.
know,
So
I'm great. I'm
being humble with your,
yes,
yeah. Um,
and I know that, the right people will come along
mm.
where regarding my art, whether it's my Etsy store, Jeanne Art Heart, or whether it's my website, jeanniebuesser.com. And the right people will come along and connect with it.
So I hear you talking about trust.
Yes.
Say say a little more about that.
Yeah. So, trusting and knowing that the people upstairs will guide the people who need to be, or me for me to connect with, will come into my space or whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
It's like what you put out is what you get back.
Mm. Yeah, well, that's an age-old truth for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, are there any, you know, like you've talked about the groups that you've created regarding apraxia and
I mean, that is no longer that group is
mhm,
no longer. They
mhm,
said I stopped it after 20 odd years.
yeah.
Um,
Are there any groups currently that you're, you know, like part of that
yeah, there's one called Cherub, CHERAB.org.
mm,
That's on Facebook as well.
okay.
Um, but I think, I also think as I'm going along in my journey is there's a lot of how can I say it? There's a lot of not boundaries, but there's a lot of if you maybe it should be boundaries, yeah. So there's a lot of people who, well, I would say that I've found is when your children are special needs and they go through um, high school or whatnot, that stops. And therefore, so
What's
in other words, the educational stops. So therefore, a lot of individuals may not necessarily, what I'm learning now, may not necessarily have been taught the steps of what it is for cooking,
mm,
what it is for cleaning. It's not just cleaning with a rug, excuse me, with a rag or whatnot,
mhm,
but the steps, making sure, oh, it's dirty, you have to have a rag and you
mhm.
have to put, or whatever you want, and you have to put something on it. And then you have to make sure it's clean. Then
Yeah.
after it's clean, you have to make sure you do dry it.
Right.
I'm
And then you
just
have
giving
to
a very simple,
then you have to put the things away that you know, took.
exactly,
Right.
yes.
I was a Montessori teacher for a bit, and this is something that Montessori education really, you know, pointed out that, you know, we don't teach. children these things this way, and it took a simple, task, and it
But
broke it
every
into
task,
all this into, yeah, right, anything, anything.
like every task, like I was talking to somebody today and he was agreeing with me that a lot of I'm not pointing a finger, but a lot of people are not necessarily shown those steps of just simple everyday things. So they don't know what it is to go shopping. They don't necessarily know what it is to pay a bill, or they don't necessarily know what it is to make a food list,
Or they don't
or
know
what the steps were.
or they don't know how to feel their emotions.
Exactly. And that ties in everything. Because if you can't tap into your emotions and you don't know how they're feeling, what they're capable of understanding, and so therefore it's, I look at my sons and it's not like they could tell me, "Oh, mom, I don't understand what you're saying." They might be able to say it, but I don't know how much they're comprehending because I have a tendency to talk too much.
Mm,
So I have to be able to pull myself back and say it in very simple terms, but also be able to feel into them to say, hey, do they want to be told, explain things right now, or they want to be left alone?
right. Do they need instruction, or do they need space?
Yes. Yeah. So, so it's one of those things that I'm still learning as I'm
Yeah.
going along.
Well, I think that's we're all learning that. It's like, um, we all, and as a wounded healer, and we're we're all wounded healers in some way. We all have been disadvantaged in ways, and we have to learn extra hard. And because of that, we become an experts, and then that becomes a gift we share. We're But part of sharing is the teaching,
Yeah.
and teaching's
And,
a
and, and as you
pain
said,
in
teaching's a
itself.
whole thing, especially, I never went to college or anything like that. So I'm still learning as I'm going.
Yeah.
And that never stops from what I understand.
Well, and I think that's a truth of life, is that, yeah, lifelong learner. It's like, either you grow into the rest of your life, or you retire into the rest of your life. And if you grow, then you're an advocate of growth. And but that is the truth of life, that life keeps going on, so you have to keep going on. It's not like you
Well, no, but I'll put it this way. How can I say this in a nice way? You always have a choice
right,
to be positive or not
right,
every day.
right. You always have a choice to whether to get to become negative, or let your negativity
Yes.
take over,
Yes.
or to pivot. Right, I like that word pivot.
Yeah.
I learned that from the Abraham Hicks teachings. It's like you notice excuse me, you spend enough time with the negative attitude to know what it is you don't like, and then you move 180 degrees away from that. You create the complete opposite direction, and you move in that direction.
But also be able to let it go as well.
Sure, you got to let
And acknowledge that feeling and everything else. And hey, I don't need this.
Right, and that could be a tricky thing. If you move too quickly away from it, then you're kind of bypassing. You know, so you don't want to bypass it, but you want to,
But you also want
well,
to acknowledge it.
you want to
You
acknowledge
know,
it, and,
it,
and
you,
but you don't want to wallow in it.
no.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've about covered it. If people want to get in touch with you, you have a website, right?
Yes.
So
So
it's
it's Jeannie, JeanneBuesser.com.
right, Junie.
I'm also on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'm also on Alignable. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. Not so much that much recently,
Mm.
but I'm also my books are on Amazon as well.
And hopefully soon your books will be.
Hopefully, hopefully they'll be in Barnes and Noble.
Yeah. Is there any,
That's
have you heard any kind of like timeline on that? Do you,
no, I know it's for a whole year. That's what they told me.
I see. They're going to do that and they're going to kind of like run that campaign, so to speak, for a whole year.
Yeah, but I haven't gotten all the information yet, so hopefully,
Well,
that will whatever's going to happen is happen. But I trust that, the people upstairs, um, and that positive energy make the wheels turn or whatever. I always have a prayer that I always said is thank you for the blessings, the lessons, and the challenges.
mm, yeah. It's so, in our culture, it's so um, important to emphasize the gratitude for the challenges because we're we tend to be so kind of two-dimensional or like we like in like in the East like there's the like in China the Chinese the pictures the pictograms
Yes.
the pictogram for crisis is the same pictogram for opportunity. It's like
Wow.
it's built into their culture that sort of
Yeah.
three-dimensionality about life and about um, adversity and how
Well,
that
it's yin, it's yin and yang. It's the same thing with
right
the,
exactly yeah
so
and if people just want to like send you an email
sure.
you're at
It's
Gmail, right?
yes. So it's jbmistletoe@gmail.com.
Yeah.
And if you have read my books, I'd appreciate if you're able to write a review on Amazon or send a review to the website.
Hmm.
Um, and I appreciate this opportunity. How can I say it? I'm grateful for whatever happens on a positive note. The people upstairs, and trying to teach my children love and support, opening up their hearts to a beautiful world that still is. Because there's a lot of places that you don't necessarily have to go to, as I'm learning.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you're quiet within yourself, you can travel to a lot of places.
Right. And basically you create your own reality.
Yes,
Yeah. And you are an epitome of that. And
thank you.
that's why that's why I consider you an inspiration, why I wanted to do this interview. So, Jeannie, thanks so much for your
Thank
time.
you.
Yeah.
Bless you and stay safe.
Okay. Yeah. All right.